few days ago, I was out with another organization. And, their leaders, said, "Hey, everything's going awesome." Their accountant kind of grimaced a little bit, and I said, "Oh, what's wrong?" And he said, "Well, actually, we're not doing good financially. Something's wrong here." And that's when the truth started coming out. We're going to go into that here in just a few minutes, so just hang on for a second and let's do a deeper dive into that issue. Welcome back to another episode of John the PM, where we believe that managing projects is not just a job, but a way of life. Today, I want to talk a little bit about cash and resources and financials and things. Like I kind of mentioned a little bit earlier, cash, a lot of people don't think in terms of dollars. That's perfectly fine. But you could also think in terms of labor hours. All the financial individuals are going to do is take those labor hours, multiply by some multiple, $72, $75 an hour, and come out with a dollar amount. In other words, they're just going to monetize the resources in order to get to a dollar. And then, of course, your materials are going to be whatever the material costs are. Now, let's go back to the scenario that we had just mentioned where the organization said that they had lots of work, everything was going great, except their accountant was kind of grimacing. What it was essentially that they were going broke. Now, you might ask, John, how can you go broke if you have lots of work that is going on? Well, it's a true statement. You can have a lot of work going on. You can have a lot of activity going on. The first issue is, are you actually being paid for it? Now, you may have actually sent out a quote. You may have sent out an invoice, but have you actually gotten paid? So, three steps that are in there. And you might ask yourself, did you get paid in a reasonable amount of time? Now, most people can manage their cash flow that way. Even if it's just in a bank, a checking account, they kind of realize that, hey, the checking account is getting low. I need to go and do some more collections. That's what your accounts receivables or your credit managers might do. So, hopefully, we're a little bit past that on that side. But then the second issue that usually kind of comes up is, how are you maintaining your books? Now, I don't believe that project managers need to be the financial accountant experts, but they should know enough in order to provide guidance to their financial accounting counterparts so that they can be assistance of value back to them. So, having said that, the question now becomes, how are you actually maintaining your books? Now, a lot of organizations, they just maintain one book, which is appropriate, but then now have like all the cash is going in, all the revenue going into one account, and they may have expenses being pulled out of that same account. Hopefully, if you're a small business concern, you kind of separated out your business from your personal. But let's kind of stay focused on this business side. Now, the issue usually comes in that they sometimes don't know which projects are bleeding them or which projects are encouraging them, which ones are anchors and which ones are engines. Anchors being the ones that are holding you back. So you can actually have a lot of activity going through. You can actually be getting cash, but on some projects, you may actually be losing a lot of dollars and causing a great deal amount of stress. Other projects, you might be doing extremely well. Now, it's my true belief that project managers are business owners, okay? And so that they kind of look at the project as a business. And as they're kind of managing their cash flow, on those businesses, again, with the help of their accountants, and that's perfectly fine. As they do work, they should be billing. And then once they get the billing, they should be able to pay out, as accordance as they're going through. That's almost the basic essence of progressive payments. Now, the other side from a business perspective is that it is incredibly helpful, especially when you get over a certain size, to have your books set up by projects. And so each project will generate some funds and each project would be held to those expenses. This way you can tell by project what is happening. Most organizations think or believe that they're doing that, but I can usually slide it pretty quick. A lot of times, they start running into cash flow issues or they're robbing Peter to pay Paul, one of those scenarios. So let's break this down for a home renovation project. And let's say that the contractor has three houses, A, B, C. Okay, so Alpha, Bravo, Charlie, just three separate houses. And let's say that from A, they're doing a $10,000 renovation project. On Bravo, they're doing a $20,000 renovation project. On Charlie, they're doing a $30,000 renovation project. Okay. Again, just kind of keeping it simple and straightforward. Let's say they don't do 50 down on the 10 and the 20, but they do on the 30. Okay, so now the gentleman has $15,000 in cash that's in the bank. Well, where they start running into problems is when they use that $15,000 to buy materials for A and B, Alpha and Bravo. See, Alpha and Bravo haven't paid yet, but they're actually using the money, that the cash that they generate from Charlie, onto their project. Now, a couple of things can happen is that if they're not keeping it up, meaning that they don't have like house Delta Echo, what they could happen is that they could actually run out of money for Charlie. Now, the homeowner of Charlie, they're going to be pretty upset, if that occurs, because they're going to say, "Hey, I've already paid you, so therefore my project," they may or may not actually know about the rest of the work, but my stuff should be able to be done. And then, so what'll happen with the general contractor is that maybe you'll get a bridge loan, or in order to kind of keep the whole enterprise, afloat. That is dangerous. Don't do that. Keep the project separate. Alpha, Bravo, Charlie. As Alpha pays you, you generate the expenses. Now you may pay back the expenses. Excuse me. Now you may come back and say, "But John, that's not the way we do it in this business." And I say again, what happens is that you essentially just kind of built up a house of cards. You may say, "Hey, John, we actually don't have the money in order to start the project." If you don't have enough in retained earnings in order to do that, then what you may have to go back to your customer and say, "In order to get started, I need 20% down or 50% down." Now, they may come back and say, "We don't trust you." The way that you can trust each other is by using a lockbox. Work that out with your bank, but essentially you put the money into some kind of an account, and then you present the billings and so forth, and the payments can occur. You can ask for details about that system from your bank. The point of this conversation is really what I would encourage you to do, especially if you're in a small business concern, is to look at your work in terms of projects and keep the cash flow in accordance with each project. Now, we could switch plates a little bit differently, and we can also go into revenue. Maybe in a type of business where your revenue just kind of like all comes in, like a retail. What I would say, again, think things more in project oriented, is where is your source of revenue coming from? And you should have line items, saying that it's coming from, out from line 1, line 2, line 3, line 4. And consequently, when you go and pay the bills back to those vendors, again, it's in line 1, line 2, line 3, line 4, on those pieces. This way you can tell what your profitability is by line or by project, depending on which way your business actually portends itself. All right, so just a couple of key points I just want to leave you with. Actually, really just one major point. Depending on how complex your billings are, your projects are, what I would encourage you to do is within your books, have your books set up by projects. If your concern is not that large, for whatever reason on that side, there's plenty of things, at least do it off sheet, okay, off books. So that you can kind of keep track of profitability by projects. This way, when a similar project comes back up, you know best about how to resource it, estimate it, and make it a smooth outcome for everybody that's concerned. All right, well, hopefully you found that session helpful. If you did, please hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. It helps us to be back of service back to you. And in the meantime, may all of your projects be highly successful.